Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Loving and Living the Quran, a podcast for practical spirituality for modern Muslims. These series of lectures were recorded from live sessions that we had this year in Muharram, which is July 2024. The topic that we chose for our reflections was finding peace in an imperfect world. If you have any comments or suggestions for topics, please email at livingthequran786@gmail.com. And do sign up for our newsletter so that you don't miss a single episode at livingthequran.org. That is livingthequran.org. Thank you for listening. My mothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. By the grace, tawfiq, and blessings of Allah, today is our fifth lecture on the topic Finding Peace in an Imperfect World, Balancing Acceptance, Action, and Hope. And throughout the series, we have been trying to focus on a little bit of theory, obviously, from the Quran, some learnings, some reflections from the Quran, and then making it really practical so that we can actually use these majalis, use this Parshiaza to bring even a slight change in our lives, a slight transformation in our lives. And as always, alhamdulillah, thank you so much for all your feedback. Some people, quite a few people have requested for the recordings. I'm sorry, I just have not had the time to upload them yet, but inshallah, in the next day or two, maybe by tonight, at least the first 4 lectures should be up on the YouTube channel. The podcast will take a little bit longer, so just bear with us. The channel is called Living the Quran. Some of you may be following it already. I would request, if you are using the channel, just subscribe to it. It does help because it helps reach a wider audience. We know everything about social media is about engagement. So if you leave a comment or two, it actually helps pass on the message to others as well. Salawat. And for questions, I'll mention again, the email to use is livingthequran786@gmail.com. And if I don't manage to answer the questions here, inshallah, on the podcast at some place, I will, answer the question to the best of my ability and post it. And if it comes directly into the email, then I can also respond if it is something beyond my field of practice. So some of the practices of finding peace that we've been talking about, we started by talking about noticing choice in our lives. And we use the example of Sayyidah Hajra to really, explore what it looks like to take action even under the most difficult circumstances, right? And yesterday we started talking about the practice of contentment. And we said how, even though contentment is so directly linked to peace, it is kind of goes hand in hand. We can even exchange the words, right? We say, I'm contented, I'm at peace, I'm happy. All of these mean the same things, at least in our spoken language. And yet contentment today is a very difficult thing to achieve. And we talked about some of the reasons why, some of the reasons being, the way the capitalist structure operates today in the world of the internet. We are a product, and this is something that, especially for young people, it is very important to know that if we are not careful, if we are not critical users of social media, it will all be unconscious learning. When it's unconscious learning, I'm not even aware of what I believe. I'm not even aware of what is sinking in, right? And the Quran tells us that, look, be careful of your food. And our social media feeds are probably a lot more important than the physical food that we eat, because it's unconscious, it impacts our soul, it impacts all of that. So we said that it is very challenging, and yet there are lots of things we can do. And some of the very, very simple practices that we suggested, anyone remember what they were? What are some of the practices we talked about? I know some of us got quite uncomfortable. Me too. So remember the 30-day list, right? That if we want to buy something, instead of buying it straight away, let's just pause. Let's just think if we really want it, or if it's just the ad that is getting to me. Because very often, and we really talked a lot about The technical term is hedonic adaptation, but basically that we get used to good things. And when we get used to good things, it takes more and more to satisfy us, more and more. And this is, by the way, whether we're conscious of it or not, and I gave lots of examples yesterday, it happens to all of us. This is the human condition. And that is why we need to be intentional about it. We've been talking about intention throughout these series, right? That the whole idea is that if we want to change something, if we want to do better in our lives, if we want to be awake rather than ghafil, we need to start with an intention. And when we make the intention, we know that Allah helps us in all sorts of ways, right? And the barakah comes, the learning comes, the examples come, challenges come too, right? To test us. Okay. So, if anyone wants the questions of assessment, I know a lot of people said that they wanted to share it with their families, and that's absolutely fine. There is a page where I'm putting all the resources, and I don't want to share it here because anyway. But if you find the website, which is livingthequran.org, there will be a sign-up form, and you can get all the resources you want on there, okay? So today our topic is tawakkul. Tawakkul meaning trust in Allah. And this is a topic actually that's talked about a lot, from the Mimbar. And as always, I will try to make it as practical as we can so that we can actually develop it, okay? And so we talk about what is tawakkul according to the Quran and Hadith, the impact of tawakkul on our lives. And then tawakkul in action. What are some examples that we can see from the Quran, from history, which show us what tawakkul looks like? And as always, we will also talk about why tawakkul is so challenging in today's world. Anyone heard of anxiety? Anyone not anxious? Let me start there, okay? The most common mental health concern that people report these days, and it's so common that it's not even considered like unusual anymore. Everyone is anxious, right? And anxiety is actually the opposite of tawakkul. It's actually the opposite. So again, this makes this topic today very, very important, okay? So let's start with the Quran. What does Allah tell us? So this is chapter 12, verse 67. And this is when Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam is talking to his sons, right? And what does he say? He says, "Oh, my sons, do not all enter by one gate and enter by different gates." And then he says, "Wama ugni ankum min Allahi min shay'in." I cannot avail you anything against Allah. Innal hukmu illa lillah. Means judgment, the final outcome is only Allah's. Alayhi tawakkaltu wa alayhi falyatawakkalil mutawakkilun. I rely on him, and on him rely all people, all believers who rely. Okay. Now, we won't go into the story of this verse, but basically, Nabi Yaqub is like what the verse says is, do not enter. When he's talking to his sons, he says, enter by different gates. And there's many reasons why he said that. But the important thing is that, after advising them, he's telling them something very important. I'm telling you, I'm advising you based on my knowledge, based on what I think, but know this, that the final outcome, whether you enter from one gate, whether you enter from many different gates, the final outcome is in whose hands? In Allah's hand. And judgment or final outcome is always with Allah. And I have tawakkul on him, and anyone who needs tawakkul should rely on him. Okay. Now, there's a lot of other verses in the Quran which talk about this very same idea. What is the basic idea? That I, as a human being, have no control. And who has all the control? Allah. Okay, so many verses. For example, in Surah Tawbah, ayah 51, very famous verse which many of us recite every day. قُلْ يَسِيبُنَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Say, nothing will afflict us, nothing is going to harm me, except what Allah has ordained already. If Allah has ordained for me, it will happen. Right? Allah tells us in the Quran that they run away from maut, but what is maut is going to chase you. right? And we've had so many examples of this, right? Somebody goes for one day somewhere, goes out of their way to be in that particular place, and death appears, okay? There's another in Surah Al Imran in verse 160, Allah says, if Allah assists you, then there is none that can overcome you. The opposite of that, right? None can harm you, none can overcome you. However, if he forsakes you, then who is there then that can assist you after him? In other words, if Allah forsakes you, you are basically dead meat. Like nothing on this planet can come towards your help, okay? And again, فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. So believers should rely on Allah. So basically what this is saying, the original meaning of tawakkul before Quran used to be to display weakness and inability, okay? But when, in the Quran, it is used as a state which a believer puts all their trust in Allah. And this is the concept that we are going to be exploring today. So the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he asked Jibreel what it meant to trust Allah. And so Jibreel replies, to know that a creature does not harm or benefit, does not give nor denies, to cut off hope from other creatures. When a servant does this, he does not act for anyone except Allah, does not hope or fear anyone but Allah. This is tawakkul. Okay, so this is how the Prophet is explaining it. So does this mean that the believer or the one who has tawakkul does not do his bit? It does not mean that. It does not mean that you do not take full action. The Prophet ﷺ was asked once, a Bedouin asked them that, I have this camel, should I let it go free and have tawakkul, or should I tie my camel and have tawakkul? So the Prophet tells him, you must tie your camel and have tawakkul. In other words, lock your car doors. Okay. So yesterday I shared about how my car got stolen. So the reality is that if my car is going to get stolen, it can have that lock and still get stolen, right? But I have done what I can in my circle of control, okay? So tawakkul obviously arises from the Tawheedi worldview. Tawheedi means what? That Allah is at the center, He is in charge, He is in control, okay? And then, so when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was asked about this, he said that there are various degrees of trust in Allah. First, that you put your trust of God in all your affairs, okay? That you are well pleased with whatever God does to you. This is not easy, as we shall see. Knowing for certain that He does not cease in His goodness and grace towards you. In other words, have husn zan billah. Have a good opinion of Allah. Expect the best. Before an outcome happens, we have to be optimists. We expect the best. And then if it doesn't turn out the way we want, then what do? Shukr, rida with God's decision, right? So everything is a process. Within our circle of control, remember we said, outside our circle of control is only rida. It's all about acceptance. It's all about, this is my lot in life. This is what I've been given. Inside the circle of control is where I do my sa'i. Inside my circle of control is where I ask myself, what are my options? What can I do? What can I use? What resources I have, which includes people, by the way. So not depending on people does not mean, human beings are created to depend on each other. We are created to be in connection. That is our creational directive. So when Allah says only depend on Him, does not mean that you cut off from people. Some people say, I don't need anyone. That's actually not true, because we do. I can't even, am I going and milking my own cow to make my tea in the morning? Right? So we have to recognize how we are all intertwined, and that's part of Tawheed. That is not, that doesn't mean that I don't have tawakkul. So we have our actions, our sa'i, but our heart and our hope is attached to Allah. And then when we have the outcome, our heart is at peace. This is how tawakkul is related to our topic, right? That up till the time that I am in charge, I do everything. And then tawakkul is an emotional experience. I can do the same thing, and we'll talk about anxiety. I can do the same thing, but my heart can be full of anxiety, or I can do everything and then put it in the God box, right? So those are very different, experiences within. So the word tawakkul has been derived from the word wakalat, which means taking for yourself a representative, like a wakil. And how do you take a wakil? Obviously, on the basis of, you have to check them out, right? They have to be reliable. They have to have strength. They have to be able to help you. So, like I said, that psychologists tell us that trust is both an emotional and a logical act. In other words, before trusting, we're talking about human beings here, right? Before trusting someone, it's actually dumb to trust someone you have no criteria for, right? Generally, human beings go through a process in their brains where they kind of check out the person, they say how reliable he is, and then they begin to trust. And trust kind of builds, okay? So trust is also relying on someone. You don't need to trust them. Let me give you an example. You end up in the emergency room, right? The doctor that shows up, you don't know them, right? But you have to rely on them because they have to treat you. However, so why do you kind of rely on them in that situation? Because they have a badge, they have a coat, they've been through some training, hopefully, right? And, the older you get, by the way, when you see that the residents are younger than your kids, then it's a very anxiety-provoking experience, however. So if you know the doctor, or you actually know that he's the head of the department or something, your experience in that emergency room is better, isn't it? Because now you have the trust as well as the reliance. Can you understand that? Okay. So now let's take this a little bit further. Imagine that, there's, whatever, COVID, whatever, you need a life-saving shot. Okay, you and your family need a life-saving shot. You show up at the doctor's. Now you have 3 people in your family. One is a young baby, one is like a middle-aged child, like a 10, 12-year-old kid, and the other one is you as an adult. Now, when the doctor kind of gives the shot to the baby, how is the baby going to react? Sorry? They're going to cry, and they're going to try and break free, and they don't want the pain. All they know in their level of understanding is that this is hurting and I don't want it, okay? Now your 10-year-old or your 12-year-old, they have a little bit more understanding, right? So they may say, okay, fine, I'll get it. I know that this is important for me, but they're not going to be appreciating, right? They take it, they keep quiet, and that's the end of it. You as an adult know that this syringe kind of contains life-saving matter, okay? So when you take that syringe, what is your experience? It may still hurt, but you're actually thankful to the doctor, isn't it? You are like very appreciative and you really understand why this is happening. And this is the level, this is what, Imam means when he says that he's pleased with whatever God gives him because he has ceaseless hope in he expects good from his Lord. So, and remember we said right in the beginning that just because we've come a certain age, our emotional maturity often doesn't follow. So in some areas of my life, I may still be a baby, crying and screaming when I get pain. Why? Just take it away. I don't want it, right? Or I may be at the level of sabr. Okay, I'm getting it fine, it's good for me. But a moment who has true tawakkul, who has husn zan billah, will only be thankful for whatever comes their way, right? Because they understand that this is, and we'll come to God's qualifications in a bit. but they understand that this is an entity who has ceaseless caring for me. Okay. And whatever they're doing is for my good, even if I don't understand it. Remember, we said also that the problem with the modern man is that they don't have this tawakkul. Allah has given us so much knowledge that we think that we are smarter than God now, right? So we don't have that kind of thing. So, so what happens when we have tawakkul? The same experience, the pain is exactly the same. What is our experience? We have strength and we have emotional freedom. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, the essence of strength of the heart is reliance upon Allah subhanahu. This is the essence. Okay. He said, the Prophet ﷺ told us, whoever wishes to be the most powerful person amongst people must trust God. Why? Because when we are feeling inferior to people, when we think they have the ability to harm or help us, this is the crux, right? If I believe that a human being has the ability to harm or help me, my behavior will be different. I don't have that confidence because I think if I upset a person, they're going to harm me. So I feel obligated to kind of suck up to people, to flatter them unnecessarily, if I believe that somebody has that ability to harm. So, obviously, having that sense of confidence that they don't have the ability, you can speak the truth and you have emotional power, right? Needlessness and honor. So needlessness is being ghani. Ghani is a quality of God, right? Obviously, human beings can never be ghani. However, what Hadith tells us, that needlessness and honor, karama, wander around in the heart of a believer. They're kind of there, but they're kind of swimming around. When they reach the place in which there is tawakkul, they settle, they inhabit it. So beautiful, right? So again, what this is telling us, that tawakkul is an emotional experience, okay? So ease of difficulties and protection from trouble, and very importantly, protection from shaitan. So the Quran says, even those who, so here's the, innahu laysa lahu sultan. He does not have power over you. He does not have a power over you. Alal lazina amanu, two qualities, over those people who have faith. Wa ala rabbihim yatawakkalun. And on their Lord, they have tawakkul. Why? Because remember, what are shaitan's two primary ways of getting to us? He can't force us to do anything. We still have free will, right? What are his two primary ones? Sorry, what? Vasvasa, exactly. Thank you. Vasvasa, doubt, right? Destroying of hopes, thinking that other people can harm us. So it follows that if in our heart is only tawakkul on Allah, and it's only in Him that we rely, He has no power over us. Okay. So again, it's a great place of security. The challenge of trust in the modern world. Okay, like I already hinted, that the flavor of our emotional experience on this planet is one of anxiety. And there's many theories about why that is, right? Just some of them. First of all, we have too much information. Too much information. They did a study, everyone remember the Boston Marathon bombings, right? So they did, and everyone has heard about PTSD, means post-traumatic stress disorder, that if you go through something very harsh, you are likely to have emotional repercussions. You're likely to have trauma over that. That is not guaranteed, by the way, a whole different story. So they did something about, and they tested people who had PTSD after the Boston bombing. And what they found, that people who were watching it on CNN on repeat, because this is what we do, we become addicted to the news, we cannot shut it off, had higher levels of PTSD than the ones who were actually there. Okay, because again, this is 24/7 information input. The human being was not designed to be, stimulated like that all the time. By the way, for people who watched, this is, I know, in a matter in many households, watching the news last thing at night. Please do not do that. It is not good for your mental health. It will cause anxiety. It will. It's designed to cause anxiety. Okay. In this world, so by the way, when there's too much information, we have what is called increased threat perception. What do I mean by that? So, do people think that neighborhoods are more dangerous today or safer today than they were 50, 100 years ago? More dangerous, right? Everyone agrees they're more dangerous? Okay. That is not true. That is not true. I had a conversation with a young mother, and just by chance, I was saying, you live in such a nice neighborhood. It must be good for the kids. She says, my kids don't play outside. I'm like, why? She said, do you know how dangerous it is these days? Yes. It's very dangerous. I'm like, actually, it's not. Canada is a very safe place. Richmond Hill is a very safe place. But some things happen. I said, yes, but I'm just talking about data, Crime is down, mortality is down. It's just a fact. Like, look it up. People are safer today. I'm not talking about war zones. People are safer today than they have ever been. And we are so anxious. All of us have these things on our phone where we can watch children's movements, even grown children's movements all the time. So here's the thing. If it's working for you, do it. But it is, I can guarantee you, like I always say, lik ke le lo, it will cause anxiety. It's designed to cause anxiety. It is not healthy. No, people, like when I went to university, I remember first time around, I wouldn't speak to my parents for like weeks on end because you had to book a call. Like there wasn't even direct. That's how old I am, guys. We couldn't even call directly, right? And now, like, there are people who are like, I go into some homes and Skype is on just all the time. They say, yeah, we talk to each other all the time. I'm like, why are you living in different houses? Just move in together, right? This level of, attachment is not healthy, okay? So we have also, as a result of all this, we have analysis paralysis. You know what I mean? Because children today, especially young people, also, everyone, we want life to be certain. We want everything. I know, because I'll tell you, I talk to lots of young people who want to get married, who are trying to figure out whether this is the person, that is not the person, right? And they saying, but then what if? I remember very clearly a conversation, but I've just finished my degree. So if I move to this country, then I'll have to requalify. But then what if I don't get a job? But then what if this happens? But then what if this happens? I'm like, for those of us who've been married long time, did we know where our life was going to take us? Allah tells us life is uncertain. Life is uncertain. In his wisdom, he has kept knowledge of the future where? In himself. Like, I remember as a very young person, my dad once told me that, can you see around the corner? I said, huh? Obviously not. He said, that's God's wisdom. That we don't have eyesight, but now we have cameras. Now we have cameras. So we have to question this. We cannot just go with the flow and think, I'm very young, like I want to take stuff for my anxiety. I want to help my anxiety, but I don't want to change. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to keep, like if my children don't check in WhatsApp, right? In like 4 hours, I'm like calling the police and doing all of these things. But is that helping you? It's certainly not helping your kids. Let me be very clear. Okay, it's not helping your kids, and it's probably not helping us either. So surveillance gadgets increase anxiety. They're the opposite of tawakkul. Okay, a much better approach, by the way, obviously teach your children how to be safe. Obviously do that, and then let go. When Musa, she is very concerned about her child, right? And she's full of anxiety. What does Allah tell her? Sorry? No. But what does he tell her to do? Can you imagine? If somebody says, don't put the last scene on WhatsApp, we can't even do that. But what is Allah saying? If you are really concerned, I'm in charge, let go. If I want somebody to fix my watch, can I still be wearing my watch and say, please fix it? They'll say, no, actually, I need it, right? I need to look at the back to fix it for you, okay? So increased control obviously has led to helicopter parenting. It has led to a lot of issues, right? Parents today are much more involved, way beyond they need to be in children's lives, okay? Children brought up by overprotective and anxious parents gets what they do. Also controlled, right? And they're also anxious. Like we are perpetuating this cycle, okay? Reality is that despite all our efforts to control things, is life more uncertain today or less? Yes, it is. What does that tell us? That human beings are really dumb at predicting how to manage themselves without divine guidance, right? We keep trying to control. The dishwasher has to be, I had to mention the dishwasher, you guys know that. The dishwasher has to be loaded in a particular way, right? And if it doesn't, exactly what will happen, right? That's a good question to ask yourselves. So we need to, what I mean is that we start by letting go of little things. How do we control? Normally, when people have anxiety, how do they manage it? They shrink their lives. Like if I'm anxious, I won't drive. True, I won't go on the highway. I won't drive to beyond Richmond Hill, right? So that's what we try to do. Or we try to kind of, control more and more and more. That shrinks your life. Because if you're not driving, you're shrinking your life. You're not doing things that you would otherwise do. So it's not working. And we try to control more. Both these things actually feed anxiety. They don't make it less. They feed anxiety, they don't make it less, okay? So the basic formation of tawakkul is that we have to practice, and it's a practice, being okay with uncertainty. Knowing that we cannot control, this is like a continuous reminder. So, because this topic is very, very important, I don't want to rush through it. So I think let's stop here. And next time, inshallah, we will talk about how do we get to trust? How do we actually begin trusting? And I have a little bit of homework if people will accept it. And that is that I want you to look at God's resume. Okay? Because before we check anyone, before we rely on anyone, they have to be kind of competent. You don't just trust anyone, okay? So anyone know what we call God's resume? For those of us who's been in Quran classes, hopefully this will ring a bell. Good job. Ayat al-Kursi. So a lot of us read it every day, every single day, right? I want you to read it with meaning, obviously, and consider it God's resume. And then ask yourself, is this an entity worth trusting? And if you were to pick someone to trust, what else would you want? Okay. Accepted? Homework accepted? Okay. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.